Beige or a subtle taupe would be best for you, she said. Tiffany wasn't looking at me. She was looking at my reflection in the big three-way mirror. We want the photos to look cohesive and elegant. The air in the bridal boutique was chilly and smelled of fake flowers. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. She was telling me, in the kindest, cruelest way, to be invisible at my only son's wedding. I smoothed down the sleeve of my simple blue blouse. Just last Tuesday, I had watched the teller at my bank transfer $50,000 from my account to theirs. It was most of what my late husband, Robert, had left me. For a down payment on a house, my son Mark had promised, his hand on mine. A place for your future grandkids to visit. Now, standing under the bright, unforgiving lights of the shop, I realized I hadn't given them a down payment. I had bought them a party, and my ticket required me to fade into the wallpaper. Back in my quiet condo, the hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. The bank statement was still on the kitchen counter where I'd left it. The withdrawal of $50,000 was printed in black ink, but it felt like it was written in red. It looked like a wound. Mark's voice echoed in my head. "It's for a home, Mom. A place for your future grandkids." I believed him. Of course I did. He was my son. I picked up the wedding invitation from the mantelpiece. It was thick and heavy, with gold lettering that glittered in the afternoon sun. It felt like something you'd get from a king, not from a boy who used to leave his muddy sneakers by the back door. I had paid for this beautiful piece of paper, for the party it announced, and I was beginning to feel like I wasn't truly invited. A little chime came from my laptop. It was an email from Tiffany. The subject line just said, "Wedding." I clicked on it. There was a link to something called a Pinterest board. She titled it Vintage Elegance. I scrolled through the pictures. There were chandeliers dripping with crystals, hanging from the branches of oak trees. There were towers of tiny, perfect cakes, dusted with gold leaf. The floral arrangements alone looked like they cost more than my monthly Social Security check. It was all very beautiful, and it all felt very far away from my life. I scrolled to the bottom of the email, past a note about the rehearsal dinner schedule. There was a little postscript. "P.S.," it read. "Could you cover the bar tab for the dinner? It would be a huge help." My hand was shaking a little as I picked up the phone to call Mark. I waited while it rang, listening to the birds chirping outside my window. He finally answered, his voice rushed. "Hey, Mum, I'm at work. What's up?" I took a breath. "I got an email from Tiffany about the rehearsal dinner." I tried to keep my voice light. "She mentioned the bar tab." He sighed, a long, weary sound. "Mom, it's just how weddings are these days. Things add up. We're a little over budget." I clutched the phone tighter. "Mark, the $50,000 was for a house." There was a silence on the line, heavy and cold. Then his voice changed. It wasn't weary anymore. It was firm. "Please, Mom, don't make this difficult." At my weekly coffee morning in the church basement, the air smelled of Folger's coffee and Mrs. Henderson's lemon pound cake. The ladies were all chatting about their grandkids and their gardens. My friend Brenda was showing pictures on her phone. "Here's Dave and his new wife, Jenny," she said, her face glowing. "They just got married in their backyard. We all brought a covered dish." In the photo, a young couple stood under a simple wooden arch, surrounded by smiling people in sundresses. A pang of jealousy hit me so hard it took my breath away. Brenda looked at me. "So, Eleanor, how are the plans for Mark's big day?" I forced a smile onto my face. "Oh, everything is just wonderful," I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. "It's all going to be very elegant." A few days later, An email from the wedding planner dinged on my computer. The subject line was Mark and Tiffany, final day of itinerary. It was a spreadsheet, timed down to the minute. My eyes scanned the rows, looking for my name. I found it next to the mother-son dance. But beside the title, in parentheses, were 3 little words. TBD, may cut for time. My breath caught in my throat. Cut for time? It was supposed to be our one moment. My finger trembled as I scrolled down the schedule. Tiffany had budgeted a full hour for a father-daughter first look photo session before the ceremony. My time with Mark, for the pre-ceremony photos, was a 5-minute slot between the groomsmen's pictures and the arrival of the catering truck. May cut for time. The words stung more than wear beige. Being told to be invisible was one thing. Being told I might be erased completely was another. That evening, I didn't turn on the television. The silence in my condo felt heavy. I sat in Robert's old leather armchair, the one with the worn spot on the right arm where his hand always rested. I picked up his picture from the side table, the silver frame cool against my skin. It was from our 25th anniversary. He looked so happy. "Oh, Robert," I whispered to the glass. "You would know what to do." He wouldn't have stood for this. He would have been so angry, but a calm, steady angry. A problem-solving angry. And sitting there in his chair, I felt a tiny flicker of that strength inside me. It was a quiet, stubborn resolve that started in my chest and spread through my whole body. The next morning, I went to my bank. I needed to see it in black and white. The teller, a nice young man named Kevin with a kind smile, printed my statement. There it was. The $50,000 withdrawal looked like a gaping wound on the page, leaving my savings account with very little cushion. My Social Security check barely covered my monthly bills. This was my safety net. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Miller?" Kevin asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "We just had a seminar on financial scams targeting seniors. You have to be so careful." I forced a laugh, but it sounded thin and hollow, like a dry leaf skittering across pavement. "Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that." I folded the paper and put it in my purse. The worst scams, I thought, don't come from strangers on the phone. They come from the people who are supposed to love you. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Tiffany. Her voice was sugary sweet. "Eleanor, I am so glad I caught you. My Aunt Carol is flying in on Tuesday, and I was hoping you could do us a huge favor and pick her up from the airport." I knew that trip. With traffic, it was a 2-hour round trip, plus parking and waiting for the luggage. It was a test, a small demand to see if I was back in line. I took a slow, deep breath, feeling the air fill my lungs. "I'm sorry, Tiffany, I can't," I said, my voice even. "I have a doctor's appointment that day." It was a lie, but it was my lie. The silence on the other end was immediate and cold. "Oh," she said. "Fine." She hung up without another word. I set the phone down, my heart thumping. 2 minutes later, it buzzed with a text message. It was from Mark. "Mum, we need you to be a team player." I looked at Mark's text message. I saw the words, but I didn't feel them. I set the phone on the counter, screen down, and walked into my spare room, the room that had once been his. I opened the closet and pulled out a dusty box labeled Robert's desk. I spent the afternoon sorting through my late husband's things. The smell of old paper and cedar filled the quiet room. I found his university alumni newsletters, neatly stacked and tied with twine. He was so proud of his engineering degree. He always said it was the foundation of our whole life. I thumbed through a glossy magazine from the university, looking at pictures of new buildings and smiling students. An article caught my eye. It was about a family who had set up a scholarship in their father's name, a way to honor him, a way to build a legacy. And an idea began to form in my mind, a way to honor Robert and reclaim what was his. I made a quiet phone call the next afternoon. The sunlight streamed through my kitchen window, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. I held the cordless phone to my ear and listened to the cheerful voice on the other end. University Alumni Foundation, this is Carol speaking. Hello, Carol, I said, keeping my own voice low. I have a hypothetical question. I was thinking of honoring my late husband. He was an alumnus. That's a wonderful idea. How are you thinking of honoring him? She asked. Her voice was warm, like she had all the time in the world. A scholarship, maybe, I said. For engineering students. What would something like that cost? She explained the process. She talked about endowments and helping students for years to come. A founding gift of $50,000 would endow a scholarship in his name forever, Ma'am. $50,000. The number hung in the quiet air of my kitchen. It was the exact amount. That evening, I turned my little desk into a command center. The old printer whirred to life, spitting out one page after another. The sharp smell of warm ink filled the room. First, I printed the bank statement showing the $50,000 transfer. Then, I printed Tiffany's emails. The one about the beige dress. The one asking me to pay the rehearsal dinner bar tab. I took a pen and a clean sheet of paper. In my neatest handwriting, I wrote down Mark's words. It's for a home, Mum. And his text message. We need you to be a team player. I stapled the pages together and put them in a clean manila folder. It felt like I was an investigator, piecing together the evidence of a quiet, painful crime. My own life had become a case file. My annual checkup was the following week. The examining room was cold, and the paper on the table crinkled under me. Dr. Adams, a kind woman younger than my own son, wrapped the cuff around my arm. It squeezed tight. She looked at the reading and frowned. Your blood pressure is up a little, Eleanor. Any new stress in your life? I gave a small, tired laugh. My son is getting married. She nodded, her eyes full of understanding. She took the cuff off and patted my hand. Her touch was warm. Don't let them run you ragged, she said softly. You have to take care of yourself first. Her words felt like permission, like a prescription for something more than pills. I realized I had spent years making my world smaller to make their world bigger. When I got home, I looked up lawyers in the phone book. I decided to make a call, just for a consultation. The lawyer's office was in an old brick building downtown. It smelled of leather books and faint, sweet pipe tobacco, the way Robert's study used to. The woman who met me, Ms. Davis, had sharp, intelligent eyes and a calm smile. I sat in a comfortable chair and told her everything, right from the beginning. She listened without interrupting. She looked at the papers I'd brought from my folder. When I finished, she folded her hands on her desk. A gift with a verbal condition is still a gift with a condition, Eleanor, she said. Her voice was steady and clear. You gave them that money for a down payment on a house. Yes, I whispered. They broke the condition when they used it for a wedding instead, she continued. They did not hold up their end of the agreement. That means the money is, legally speaking, still yours to direct. On Saturday, I went to the department store. I walked straight to the women's formal wear section, the scent of a dozen different perfumes hanging in the air. I walked right past the racks of beige, taupe, and champagne. They looked like ghosts to me. My fingers brushed against silks and crepes until they found it. a dress made of deep, vibrant sapphire blue silk. It was the color of the evening sky, the color of Robert's favorite tie. In the dressing room, under the bright, unforgiving lights, I zipped it up. The fabric was cool against my skin. It fit perfectly. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't see a background character. I saw Eleanor Miller. I saw myself again. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, the overhead light buzzing softly. In my hand, I held a small index card. On it, I had written my toast. It wasn't a toast, it was a statement of fact. I practiced it over and over, my voice starting as a whisper, then growing stronger until it was calm and steady. I wasn't going to be angry or tearful. I was going to be clear. I looked at my reflection, at the new lines around my eyes, and I said the words aloud one more time. They wanted me to be a quiet, beige checkbook, I whispered to the woman in the mirror. They forgot that the person who signs the check holds the pen. I tucked the card into my purse. It felt heavier than a simple piece of paper. A few days later, my phone rang. The screen showed Mark's picture. I let it ring one more time before answering, just to prove to myself that I could. "Hi, Mum." His voice was bright, too bright. It was the voice he used when he was about to ask for something. I could hear loud music in the background. "Just wanted to see how you're doing. Getting excited for the big day?" I said I was fine. I didn't offer anything else. The silence stretched for a moment. "That's great," he finally said. "Listen, Tiffany's mum, Jan, is flying in a bit early. We were thinking, just to save on hotel costs, maybe she could stay with you for the week." I held the phone to my ear, listening to the hum of my own refrigerator. My spare room, Robert's old office, was clean and quiet. The bed was made up with fresh sheets. It would be no trouble at all. That's what the old me would have said. The old me would have been shopping for Jan's favourite coffee creamer within the hour. But the old me was tired. "No?" I said. The word came out perfectly round and smooth. It didn't have any anger attached to it, or any apology. It was just a word. On the other end of the line, there was a complete and total silence. I could picture his face, the baffled surprise. "What?" he finally stammered. "Mum, what do you mean, no?" I took a small, clean breath. "My spare room is being painted that week." I finalized the paperwork with the university the next day. I drove downtown and sat in a quiet, wood-paneled office with a woman named Mrs. Gable. She had a kind face and wore a simple pearl necklace. She slid the formal pledge agreement across the polished table. The paper was thick and creamy under my fingertips. I read the words one last time. The Robert Miller Memorial Scholarship for Engineering. I picked up the heavy fountain pen she offered me and signed my name on the line. My signature was a little shaky, but it was there. I felt a wave of peace wash over me, so strong it was like Robert himself was in the room, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. Mrs. Gable smiled. "He would be very proud, Eleanor." As I left, I felt a new sense of purpose. The first donation check was already in the mail. It was the week of the wedding. My quiet little town suddenly felt crowded with Tiffany's relatives from out of state. I ran into a few of them at the grocery store. They were easy to spot, with their expensive handbags and loud, confident voices. Tiffany's aunt, the one who was supposed to stay with me, gave me a look that was a mixture of curiosity and pity. "Oh, you must be Eleanor," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We've heard so much about you." I knew exactly what kind of stories she had heard. The difficult mother-in-law, the one who wasn't a team player. I just smiled back warmly. "It's lovely to finally meet you," I said. placing a carton of milk in my cart. I let them think whatever they wanted. The truth had a way of revealing itself, and it didn't need my help. The rehearsal dinner was at a fancy Italian restaurant with smooth jazz humming from hidden speakers. I wore a simple navy dress, not beige, not taupe. It felt good against my skin. Tiffany walked right past me without a word, her white dress rustling like expensive tissue paper. Mark came over and gave me a hug that felt like a warning, his arms stiff and his hands barely touching my back. "Glad you could make it, Mom," he said, his voice tight. "I wouldn't miss it, dear," I said, patting his arm. I found a seat at a table with a distant cousin I hadn't seen in 10 years. I sipped my ice water, the glass cool in my hand, and listened to her talk about her grandchildren. I was conserving my energy, saving my words for when they mattered. As I excused myself to find the ladies' room, I passed by Tiffany talking to her maid of honor. "The bar tab is just astronomical," she whispered, her voice sharp with complaint. "Honestly, you'd think someone would have offered to help." The next morning, the sun streamed through my bedroom window. I laid my sapphire blue dress across the bed. The color was so deep, the color of a twilight sky. It was Robert's favorite. I took out my good low heels, the comfortable ones, and polished them with a soft cloth until they shone. In my handbag, I placed my wallet, my lipstick, and a small white index card. I had practiced the words written on it until they felt like my own heartbeat. I read them one last time, my voice quiet in the still room. I felt no nerves, no flutter in my stomach. A profound, steady calm had settled over me. A storm was coming, I knew, but I was the anchor. I walked into the reception hall, and the cheerful chatter dropped for a moment. Heads turned. My blue dress was a shock of colour in a sea of champagne, blush, and pale grey. I could feel their eyes on me. Tiffany stood near the cake, a mountain of white frosting and sugar flowers. Her smile was a thin, brittle line painted on her face. She saw I had disobeyed. Mark rushed over to me, his face tight with anger. He grabbed my elbow, his fingers digging in. "What are you doing?" he hissed, his voice low and furious. "You look ridiculous." I pulled my arm away gently and looked him right in the eye. "Mark," I said, my voice even and clear. I've never felt more like myself. They had seated me at a table in the very back, right next to the swinging doors of the kitchen. Every few minutes, a waiter would burst through, and I'd get a blast of hot air and the smell of garlic. My friend Brenda, my +1 for the evening, leaned over to me. "Well, Eleanor," she whispered, with a twinkle in her eye. "This is the naughty table, isn't it?" We shared a small, secret smile. I looked across the vast room to the head table, draped in white linen and overflowing with flowers. I watched Mark laugh at something Tiffany said and saw them pose for a photographer, their smiles wide and perfect. They looked like strangers to me, characters in a movie I had paid for, but wasn't allowed to be in. The toasts began after the main course plates were cleared. The clinking of forks quieted down. The best man told a rambling, tipsy story. Tiffany's father cried a little. Then the DJ, a young man with slicked back hair, stepped up to the microphone. "And now, folks, let's have a big round of applause for a special toast from the groom's mother, Eleanor Miller." A spotlight hit our table, making me blink. I saw Mark and Tiffany at the head table, smiling those big, empty smiles, waiting for me to praise them. They had no idea what was coming. "Good evening," I said. My voice was steady. It didn't even tremble. "I'm Eleanor. I'm Mark's mother." The room was quiet, except for the low hum of the air conditioning. I could see my son and his new wife at the head table, their smiles looking a little tight. When a parent gives a gift to their child, they do it out of love, and for their future, I continued, looking out at the sea of faces. My gift to Mark and Tiffany was for their future home, a foundation for the family they plan to build. I paused, just for a second. Mark's smile was gone. Tiffany's face was a frozen mask. They decided to use that gift for this beautiful celebration instead, I said, my voice clear and calm. That is, of course, their choice. A wedding is one day, but a home is a lifetime. They chose the day. I let that hang in the air. A few people shifted in their seats. The crystal glasses on the tables seemed to glitter a little brighter under the spotlights. And so, I said, taking a small breath, I have decided to make a choice of my own, a choice to honor the man who made that gift possible, my late husband, Robert. I'm so proud to announce the creation of the Robert Miller Memorial Scholarship at his alma mater, I said, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. The gift of $50,000 will help young engineering students build their own futures for many years to come. A woman in the front row gasped. I saw the color drain from Tiffany's face, leaving her makeup looking like a painted shell. Mark looked like he had been punched, his mouth slightly open. So, in lieu of a toast to the couple, I finished, I ask you to join me in a moment of silent reflection, honoring the legacy of a truly generous man. Thank you. I placed the microphone back on its stand with a soft click. I did not look at the head table again. I turned and walked through a sea of stunned, silent faces. The only sound was the soft rustle of my blue dress and the tap of my sensible heels on the polished floor. I reached my table in the back, by the noisy kitchen doors. My friend Brenda was looking at me with wide, admiring eyes. I sat down. I picked up my knife and fork. I cut into my piece of salmon and took a bite. It was perfectly cooked, flaky and warm. The silence in the grand hall was finally broken by a few people clapping, a hesitant, scattered sound. Then it died out. I saw Tiffany's mother marching toward my table, her face a tight knot of fury. "How dare you?" she seethed, her voice a low hiss, so only our table could hear. "You ruined my daughter's wedding." I looked up from my plate and met her eyes. "I simply honored my husband," I said calmly. "Are you against scholarships for needy students?" She had no answer for that. She just sputtered. But then I saw movement behind her. Mark was stumbling towards me, his face a mask of pure fury. Before Mark could reach me, Brenda stood up. Her back was straight as a flagpole. Several other older guests at the tables nearby also got to their feet, a silent, grey-haired army. The clatter of their chairs on the polished floor was surprisingly loud. "Eleanor, we were just leaving," Brenda said, her voice clear and firm. She put her hand on my arm. The warmth of her touch went right through my sleeve. "It's getting late." I nodded, not trusting my voice. We walked out together, a small, dignified procession. I didn't look back at Mark's furious face or Tiffany's white-hot glare. We left them in the middle of their expensive party, surrounded by the wreckage of their own making. In the quiet of Brenda's Buick, my little purse on the seat between us started to buzz. It sounded like an angry hornet trapped in leather. I pulled out my phone. The screen was lit up with Mark's name. Then a text from Tiffany, the words too small to read. Then another call. "Don't you dare answer that," Brenda said, her eyes on the road. The streetlights slid across her face. I looked at the phone vibrating in my hand. It felt heavy, like a stone. I held down the button on the side until the screen went black. The ensuing silence was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The next morning, I made my coffee and sat on my small balcony. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and blooming petunias. My phone was still off, sitting on the kitchen counter like a sleeping cat. The world felt new. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I knew one would never come. I wasn't waiting for a fight either. That would come, but I wasn't holding my breath for it. For the first time in a very long time, I was simply being. I watched a little sparrow take a bath in the puddle on my neighbour's lawn, and I felt a deep, quiet peace settle over me. Later that afternoon, I turned on my computer. There was an email from Tiffany. The subject line was just my name, in all capital letters. It was full of angry, misspelled words, calling me a vindictive old woman and demanding I fix this immediately. She said I had ruined the most important day of her life. I took a slow sip of my lukewarm tea. I read the email one more time. Then I clicked forward and sent it to my lawyer, a woman named Miss Davis. I wrote only one sentence in the body of the message. For your records. Her reply came back in less than 5 minutes. It was calm and clear. They are emotional, she wrote. They have no legal standing. Do not engage. On Thursday, I did something I had wanted to do for years. I went to a meeting for the local historical society. It was held in the basement of the library, a room that smelled of old paper and lemon polish. I met a woman named Margaret, who was passionate about old maps, and a man who could talk for an hour about the town's original brickwork. We always need volunteers for the Saturday tours, Margaret said, handing me a pamphlet. Just to greet people, hand out brochures. I took the sign-up sheet and a pen that was chained to the table. My signature looked a little shaky, but it was there. My life was mine again, and I was finally writing the next chapter myself. A thick, cream-coloured envelope arrived in the mail. The return address was a law firm downtown. I knew without opening it that it was full of angry words typed up by a man I'd never met, paid for with money I had given my son. I took a black marker from the kitchen drawer. Across the front, in big clear letters, I wrote, "Return to sender." I dropped it in the outgoing mail slot in my building's lobby without a second thought. That evening, the phone rang. It was my niece, Sarah, and she was crying. "Aunt Eleanor, Mark just called me." Her voice was shaky and small. He screamed at me. He said I was a traitor for liking your picture from the Historical Society on Facebook. I held the phone tighter. The plastic felt cold against my ear. "What did you say to him?" "Nothing," she sobbed. "I was so shocked I just hung up. He said I was just like you. Why would he say that to me?" I looked at the wall, at a framed photo of Sarah and me at her high school graduation. Her sweet, hopeful face. "Because he's a bully, honey," I said, my voice low and steady. "And bullies hate it when you're not afraid of them." She took a shuddering breath. "Am I cut out of the family now?" The next morning, I called my lawyer, Mrs. Davis. The line clicked, and her calm, professional voice came on. "Eleanor, how are you?" "I'm fine, thank you," I said. "I need to make an appointment. It's time to revise my will." There was a short pause on the other end. I could hear the faint rustle of paper. "Of course," she said. "Is everything all right?" I thought of Sarah's tear-stained voice and Mark's rage. I thought of the scholarship and the quiet pride I felt. "Everything," I said, and I was surprised to find I meant it, "is finally getting to be right." I sat up a little straighter in my chair. "Mark will no longer be my executor, and I want to make some significant changes to the beneficiaries." We set a time for Tuesday. When I hung up the phone, the condo was silent. It wasn't a lonely silence anymore. It was peaceful. A week later, another thick, cream-colored envelope arrived. This one had the university's crest in the corner. My hands didn't tremble as I opened it with Robert's old silver letter opener. Inside was a heavy, formal letter thanking me for my foundational gift to the Robert Miller Memorial Scholarship. Tucked behind the letter was another piece of paper. It was a short biography of the very first recipient. Her name was Maria. There was a small, smiling photo of a young woman with bright, intelligent eyes. She was from a small town in the north, the first in her family to ever attend college. She wanted to be a civil engineer, to build bridges. I read her story twice. I smoothed the paper on my kitchen table. My $50,000 wasn't gone. It hadn't vanished on ice sculptures and champagne fountains. It was building something. It was helping this young woman build a future. I took down the wedding invitation that was still somehow on my mantelpiece, and I put the letter about Maria in its place. This was a real investment. I was in the produce aisle at the grocery store, trying to decide between a head of romaine or iceberg, when I heard a sharp voice say my name. Eleanor Miller. I turned. It was Tiffany's aunt, the one who had needed a ride from the airport. She stood with her arms crossed, her cart blocking the aisle. "I just have to say," she began, her voice loud enough for the woman examining avocados nearby to hear, "what you did to my niece was the cruelest thing I have ever witnessed." I put the lettuce in my cart. "Hello, Martha. It's nice to see you again." "Don't you nice to see you me," she snapped. "You ruined her special day, all because you didn't want to wear a simple beige dress." I looked at her. I didn't feel angry. I just felt a little sad for her. "I honored my husband," I said quietly. "That's all." "You humiliated them," she insisted. I gave her a small, tight smile. "The truth is not a humiliation, Martha. It's just the truth." I pushed my cart around hers. "You have a good afternoon." As I was waiting in the checkout line, the young cashier leaned forward. "Excuse me," she whispered. I couldn't help but hear. "That was really classy, the way you handled that." My first training session at the Historical Society was on Thursday. The building smelled of lemon polish and old books, a scent I'd always loved. I was in a room with 5 other new volunteers. There was a retired teacher named David and a widow named Carol who knew everything about antique furniture. We spent the morning learning about the founding families of our town. No one asked me about my son. No one cared about what color dress I wore to a party. They wanted to know if I could learn the history of the old mill house by next month. They wanted my time and my attention, not my money. That evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. "Hello? Is this Eleanor Miller?" a man's voice asked. It was a kind, older voice. "My name is Arthur Jenkins. I was in the engineering program with your husband, Robert, back at the university." I sat down, my heart giving a little flutter. "Yes? Hello, Arthur." "I saw the announcement about the scholarship in the alumni newsletter," he said. "It's a wonderful thing you've done, Eleanor. A truly wonderful thing. Bob was a great man." He paused. "I was wondering if you'd let an old friend take you to coffee sometime. I have some stories about him from back in the day I think you'd enjoy." I smiled, a real smile that reached my eyes. "I would like that very much, Arthur." For the first time in years, a door to the future had opened, and I wasn't afraid to walk through it. The lawyer's office smelled like lemon polish and old paper. The thick document felt heavy in my hands. My new will. It was all spelled out, clear as glass. My condo and remaining savings would go to my niece, Sarah. A generous donation would go to the church building fund, and Mark would receive $1. Legally, you have to leave them something, so they can't claim they were forgotten. Are you sure, Eleanor? My lawyer, Ms. Davis, asked gently. Her glasses were perched on her nose. I am, I said. The pen felt cool and solid as I signed my name on the last page. My signature was a little shaky, but my resolve wasn't. Good, she said, nodding. She took the papers and slid them into a crisp envelope. Now, one more thing. Your house is in your name alone, correct? No one else is on the deed? I told her yes. It was just me. She gave me a look I was beginning to understand. It was a look that said, let's make sure it stays that way. 6 months passed. The angry voicemails from Mark had stopped. The fall leaves turned from gold to brown, and my life settled into a quiet, pleasant rhythm. 3 days a week, I put on my volunteer badge at the Historical Society. I loved the hush of the old building, the scent of beeswax, and the curious faces of school children as I told them stories about the town's founding. One afternoon, I came home to find a letter in my mailbox with Mark's familiar, messy handwriting. It wasn't a birthday card or a holiday greeting. It was just a plain white envelope. My hand trembled a little as I slit it open with my butter knife. Inside was a single sheet of paper. He wrote about how much their rent was. He mentioned that Tiffany was having trouble finding a job in her field. He said the wedding debt was a heavy weight. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask for money directly. He just laid out all his troubles like a sad display at a yard sale. The last line was the worst. I just wish you could be happy for me. I read the letter twice, then folded it and placed it on the kitchen counter. For a moment, the old pull was there. The mother instinct to fix things, to smooth the path for my child. The hum of the refrigerator filled the quiet room. I looked at the letter, then at the photo of Robert on the little table by the window. I thought of his hard work, of the savings he'd carefully built. It was meant for a foundation, not a leaky roof on a life of bad choices. The feeling passed. It left behind not anger, but a kind of calm, sad clarity. I knew what I had to do. I took the letter with me to my coffee morning with Brenda. The church hall was warm and smelled of cinnamon rolls. I pushed the letter across the table. He sent this, I said. Brenda read it, her lips tightening. Oh, for goodness sake, she sighed, handing it back. He's a 35-year-old man, Eleanor, not a schoolboy who lost his lunch money. I know, I said, stirring my coffee. But it still hurts to see. Of course it does, she said, patting my hand. But you know what this is, don't you? It's a test. He's dangling the bait to see if the fish is still biting. Her words were blunt, but they were true. I wasn't that fish anymore. I wasn't even in that pond. The next day, my niece Sarah called. Her voice was flustered. Aunt Eleanor, have you seen Tiffany's Instagram? Sarah, honey, you know I don't look at that sort of thing, I told her. Well, you should see this, she said. She posted a picture of a single can of soup on a shelf. The caption says, "Dinner for 2 tonight. Some people don't understand that family is supposed to help each other through hard times." I closed my eyes. The manipulation was so childish, so public. They weren't trying to talk to me anymore. They were trying to perform for an audience, to paint me as the villain in their sad little play. Don't you worry about it, I told Sarah. It has nothing to do with you, and even less to do with the truth. But after I hung up, I sat in my quiet living room and felt a chill. They would never stop, would they? They would just find new ways to throw stones. The real estate agent unlocked the door to a small cottage at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. It smelled of fresh paint and lemon cleaner. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, making little rainbows on the new countertops. It was half the size of my old condo, and 100 times brighter. "It has a lovely little patio for your morning coffee, Mrs. Miller," the agent said, her voice soft. I ran my hand along the cool granite. I imagined my coffee cup sitting right there. I pictured Brenda coming over for tea, not having to buzz up to a sterile apartment building. No ghosts lived here. No memories of a little boy doing his homework at the table, or a grown son asking for money with his hand out. "I'll take it," I said. Putting the "For Sale" sign on the lawn of the condo felt like planting a tombstone for the woman I used to be. I was glad to see her go. My niece Sarah called me, her voice tight with panic. "Aunt Eleanor, my laptop just died. It just went black. My final paper is on it, and my exams are next week." I didn't hesitate. I thought of the $50,000, a sum so large it had become meaningless. Then I thought of this small, real problem. "Meet me at the computer store in an hour," I told her. "We'll get you a new one." In the store, as the young man was ringing up the purchase, Sarah threw her arms around me. The hug was so fierce, it almost knocked the wind out of me. "No one's ever just solved a problem for me like that before," she whispered into my shoulder, her voice thick with tears. "That's what family is for, sweetie," I said, patting her back. I felt a pang of sadness for her, that this simple act of care was so surprising. As we left, she squeezed my hand. "You're the strongest person I know." The doorbell rang one evening after I had just finished unpacking the last box in my new cottage. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I looked through the peephole, my heart gave a tired little lurch. It was Mark. He looked thin, and the porch light carved deep shadows under his eyes. "Mum, can I come in?" he asked when I opened the door. He sat on my new sofa, refusing tea or water. He talked about their mountain of debt from the wedding. He said Tiffany couldn't sleep, that she cried all the time. "That party ruined us, Mom," he said, staring at his hands. I listened. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a vast, quiet distance. "I'm sorry to hear that things are difficult, Mark," I said. My voice was calm and even. "Those were your choices." He looked up at me then, his eyes searching my face for the old weakness, the old guilt. He didn't find it. His expression hardened. He stood up to leave, his shoulders slumped in defeat. At the door, he turned back. "Dad would be ashamed of you," he said. The words were quiet, meant to be the final, killing blow. His words followed me out to the patio the next morning. I sat in my little wicker chair, sipping my coffee and watching a fat robin peck at the lawn. "Dad would be ashamed of you." I thought of Robert. I thought of his booming laugh, of the way he always stood up to bullies, of how fiercely he loved me. Ashamed? No. Robert would have been furious. He would have been furious that his son had tried to swindle his wife, the woman he was supposed to protect. He would have been proud that I finally stood up for myself. For him. My phone buzzed on the little table beside me. The screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was. I pressed and held the number, and a little menu appeared. I tapped block. Then I tapped delete. A little puff of digital smoke, and it was gone. I looked at my hands, still smudged with a bit of potting soil from the day before. For the first time, I felt like I had truly washed them clean. Brenda and two other ladies from my Historical Society book club were crowded into my small living room. The whole cottage smelled of the cinnamon bread I had baked that morning. We were discussing a biography of a president's wife, and the laughter was easy and warm. An official-looking envelope had arrived that morning. I'd left it on the counter, but now, with my friends around me, I felt brave enough to open it. It was from the university. Tucked inside was a handwritten letter on a simple note card. I cleared my throat and read it aloud. Dear Mrs. Miller, my name is David. I am a sophomore in the engineering program. I work 2 jobs to pay my tuition. Because of the Robert Miller Memorial Scholarship, I can quit one of them and focus on my studies. I will be the first person in my family to graduate from college. Thank you. You have changed my life. Brenda reached over and squeezed my hand. There were tears in her eyes. Oh, Eleanor, she said. That's real elegance. Later that evening, the phone rang. It was Arthur, a kind widower from the Historical Society with twinkling eyes and a passion for local history. Eleanor, he said, his voice pleasant. The symphony is playing Mozart next Friday. My wife was never a fan, but I still have my season tickets. I was wondering if you might like to join me. I looked around my quiet, peaceful little home. I thought of a future filled not with obligations and anxieties, but with music and cinnamon bread and friends. Arthur, I said, a smile spreading across my face. I would like that very much. A year passed, then another. The quiet rhythm of my days became a comfort. I volunteered at the Historical Society twice a week, my sapphire blue dress hanging in the closet for special occasions. One afternoon, a thick cream-coloured envelope arrived from the university. Inside wasn't a formal report, but a handwritten card. The student's name was David. He was a sophomore, and Robert's scholarship meant he didn't have to work 2 jobs. He could just focus on becoming an engineer. Your husband must have been a wonderful man, he wrote in neat, careful script. Thank you for letting his legacy help me build my future. My eyes welled up. It was the first time I had cried in months, but these were not tears of grief. They were tears of profound, quiet joy. At the bottom of the card, he had added a small note. If you're ever on campus, I would be honored to buy you a coffee. My niece Sarah came over for lunch the next Saturday. I was showing her how to make Robert's favorite apple pie, the kind with a crumb topping. My hands, now spotted with age, moved with an old certainty as I cut the butter into the flour. Aunt Eleanor, she said, watching me. You seem so light. I am, dear, I told her, not looking up from the bowl. The smell of cinnamon and sugar filled my small kitchen. I finally put down a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. She nodded, then took a deep breath. Mark called me last week, for my birthday. I stopped my work and looked at her. Oh? And how was that? It was fine, she said, shrugging. He asked how you were. I just said you were busy and happy. She paused. That's all you need to know, Auntie. He made his choice. I saw in her eyes a fierce loyalty that warmed me more than my oven ever could. I was in the produce aisle at the grocery store, picking out a perfect head of lettuce for the church potluck. The air hummed with the quiet chill of the refrigerators. Then I saw them, near the frozen foods, Mark and Tiffany. She was pointing at a box of pizza rolls, her face tight and angry. Mark was staring at his phone, his shoulders slumped. They looked tired. They looked like all the money they had spent had bought them nothing but a bigger cage. I felt a ghost of a pang, not of anger, but of a deep, sorrowful pity. They were strangers to me now, caught in a life they had built on a foundation of lies. I turned my cart, pushed it past the bright displays of fresh fruit, and did not look back. Brenda and I joined a senior travel club. Our first trip was a simple bus tour to see the autumn leaves in New England. On the ride home, as the bus rumbled through the twilight, she nudged me. So, That Arthur from the Historical Society, she said with a sly smile. He certainly seems to enjoy your company. I felt a blush creep up my neck. Arthur was a kind widower, a retired history professor with a gentle laugh. He's just a friend, Brenda. Friends are good, she said, patting my hand. Her hand was warm and dry, especially the ones who make you smile. I looked out the window at the passing lights of small towns. I was smiling. I hadn't even realized it. This morning, I woke before the sun. I made my coffee and took it out to my little balcony. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and the geraniums I kept in a pot. The sky was turning from a deep indigo to a soft, hopeful grey. I held the warm ceramic mug in both hands, feeling its heat seep into my fingers. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. It was mine. I thought about the wedding, about the beige dress I never wore and the sapphire one I did. I thought about the scholarship and the young man named David. I realized then that my late husband's money had, in the end, been used to build a home after all. Just not the one my son had described. It was building a future for a deserving young man, and it had helped me build this one, right here, for myself. I took a sip of my coffee and decided I would write back to David. I would love to meet him.